Hello students, welcome back again. Let us see how the food consumption patterns are there in our country. So, which food consumption patterns is very important for the health of any individual. So, in general, what is the food consumption pattern in India? Let us see. The food consumption pattern refers to the habitual choices and preferences individuals or communities make in their diets over a certain period. So, in India, the food consumption patterns vary significantly by the region, socioeconomic status and access to nutritious food. While overall caloric intake has increased, the substantial proportion of the population still experiences malnutrition, particularly among the poorest. The diet of many Indians is heavily reliant on cereals with limited consumption of fruits, vegetables and protein sources. Urban areas, they tend to have higher consumption of animal products and processed foods, while rural areas rely more on cereals and pulses. The global agricultural and food systems have evolved from the food inadequacy and they are working towards achievement of nutrient or nutritional adequacy in terms of acceptable standards. However, these are facing challenges of sustainability environmentally, socially and economically. Intensification of agricultural production, increasing population, fast pace of urbanization and changing lifestyles have all contributed to the changing production and consumption compositions, affecting not only the diets, but also adding environmental pressures on the limited natural resources. Therefore, sustainability of the food systems has become a big concern. However, according to the United Nations 2020 Sustainable Development Goal or to zero hunger aims to end hunger and achieve food security and provide an improved nutritional status through sustainable agriculture. There is a close association between unhealthy diets and lifestyles and the growing occurrence of non-communicable diseases in the developing countries. In the focus of sustainable development should be not only a consumption of healthy and fresh food, but also to develop sustainable patterns of consumption that remains in sync with the food production ecosystem. Low carbon and plant based diets including more of fruit and vegetables, grains, etc. are considered to be sustainable owing to their positive impact towards reducing the global warming, whereas animal based diets, especially meats from ruminants, tend to have the highest environmental impact in the form of the greenhouse gas emissions, land use, nutrition pollution, and this is considered to be 100 times more than the whole grains. Fish as a part of non-vegetarian diet has lower environmental impact because of wide variety of fish production adopted like aquaculture, etc. Then milk and milk products and poultry also have been found to have lower environmental effects in comparison to meat, but higher environmental impacts than most plant based foods. Rapid urbanization of Indian economy has led to an increase in the income of consumers, leading them to spend their additional disposable income, diversification in their food baskets, luxury goods, etc., which were initially not affordable. Reasons like increasing workforce, participation in urban jobs, increasing entrepreneurial cultural in India, availability of convenient foods items, large number of nuclear family setups, etc. have also encouraged to the trend of eating away from home. Adding to this demand are the increasing number of food startups, and entrepreneurial setups in Indian arena. They are procuring fresh agricultural products like fruits, vegetables, milk, eggs, etc., and providing them to the consumer's doorstep. Although the diversified consumption of baskets have indicated to move towards inclusion of more high value agricultural products like milk and milk products and meat, egg and fish, fruits and vegetables, but this trend is not uniformly distributed across all the section of society and also come at an environmental cost of greenhouse gas emissions and food wastage. India is currently facing the issue of triple malnutrition. At one end of the spectrum is the issue of stunting and underweight of children, which is most prevalent in the lower end of the society, and on the other problem of obesity and diabetes of both children and adults, mostly experienced by more affluent sections of the society. Now, rising incomes, increasing urbanization, changing of food preferences owing to diversified food choices, opportunity, costs of time owing to women participating in workforce have been extensively cited as reasons that have contributed to diversification of the consumer's food basket. In developing countries, this shift is food consumption is evident from the declining relevance of cereals and increasing importance of high value agricultural products. The high value agricultural products can be defined as agricultural goods with high economic value per kilogram, per hectare or per calorie, including fruits, vegetables, milk and milk products, meat, fish and eggs. According to the International Comparison Program, World Bank, 71.5% of India's total population cannot afford healthy diet. So, an Indian on an average will have to spend 74% of their food expenditure to afford nutritionally adequate diet. Across the world, 3 out of 4 categories of the high value agricultural products like fruits, vegetables and animal products are considered to be the most expensive. The Lancet research shares that in South Asian countries, these high value agricultural products basket of commodities will cost maximum to the consumer, with fruit and vegetables taking the share of 31.3%, followed by meat, eggs and fish 18.9% and dairy products 13.8%. In the backdrop of changing consumer awareness about nutrition, increased affordability of consumer segments and global concern of sustainable development, the consumption pattern of Indian population may be critically examined for purpose of designing future predictions and policy implications. The food consumption trends in India, we have the GDP per capita of India experienced an increase of 8.6% from 94 to 2012. During this period, although the monthly per capita expenditure on overall consumption increased, there has been a decline in the share of expenditure on food consumption. Rural India has experienced a decline of 23% as compared to the urban areas, where the decline is approximately 30%. This trend is in conformity with Engel's law, which states that with the increase in income, the share of expenditure allocated to food decreases. Within the food basket, the share of non-cereals in the monthly per capita expenditure has been on a consistent rise for both rural and urban areas, and the share of cereals declined from 38.5% to 24.6% from 1993 to 2012 in rural areas and from 25.7% to 15.5% in urban area, and the non-cereal contribute 74.4% and 84.5% to the total food expenditure of rural and urban consumers. So, if we see the table and compare the rural and urban areas, we can see between 1993-94 and 2011 and 12, the expenditure on the cereals and substitutes and has decreased considerably, whereas the consumption of pulses, edible oils and milk products and the fruits and nuts, meat, fish and eggs has considerably increased, and the high value agricultural products also has increased. Along with this, the expenditure on beverages and processed foods also has increased a lot. And if you see the expenditure on food, it has overall decreased, and the expenditure on non-food items has increased, because the availability of income is high. The expenditure on food items has decreased and expenditure on non-food items has increased. A similar trend was observed in the urban population also. With greater modernization, opportunities for women in jobs tend to increase, thereby leading to an increase in the opportunity of cost of women's time. So, this leads to an increased demand for time saving processed foods. Therefore, the purchase of processed food has increased enormously. With gender inclusion in the workforce, lesser time is spent on cooking food at home, and dependence on convenience and easy cook food has increased. Consumption of processed food, which has increased more prominently in urban sectors. Another major reason that has contributed to this trend is massive growth in supermarkets, especially in the urban cities, which tend to offer greater variety of snacks with added sugars and salts and processed meat. And another category that has experienced an increase in share of food expenditure of the consumers is high value agricultural basket. Within this, the milk and milk products, meat, fish and egg also have shown a steeper increase as compared to fruit and vegetable category. This clearly indicates that although the consumer has begun to diversify the basket, but the emphasis is more on livestock. The overall expenditure share of the high value agricultural products has increased from 32.7 to 43.6 in rural areas and from 39 to 47.4% in urban areas during the 19-year period. Within this, maximum change has been observed in milk and milk products and meat, fish and egg, both in urban and rural areas. The classification of food consumption pattern across the different income levels also indicate a similar shift from cereals towards an increase in share of expenditure on the high value agricultural products category. In rural areas, fruits and meat, fish and egg along with processed food category show the maximum increase in the share of expenditure. In the urban areas, the result is in sync with overall trend of diversification in the food basket. There is a change in the composition of food basket with increase in income. As we move towards higher income class, the share of commodities like fruit, vegetable has increased. The share of highest income group in food expenditure is in urban areas was 27%, and that was in rural areas it is 40%. The expenditure allocated towards high value agricultural products by the richest class was 45% and 44% in rural and urban areas respectively. This gap between the expenditure on food and high value agricultural products category is highest in the lower income groups, who tend to still continue to spend greater proportion on food expenditure on cereals. This can be owing to the reasons like high prices for the agricultural products, easy availability of cereals from excess production at home, and also the public distribution system where cereals are given to the families. Nonetheless, these patterns still indicate a transition from starch based diets to those comprising of fruits and vegetables and animal based proteins with an increase in income. The total projected expenditure on food for the year 2018-19 is 50% for rural areas and 59% for urban areas, and expenditure on milk and milk products and vegetables show more prominent rise trend in the fruits and meat, fish and egg. Recent studies on geographical distribution of dietary patterns of Indian society has found that the intake of animal based products like poultry and beef less than 10 grams per capita per day and fruits less than 50 grams is quite low as compared to dairy intake, which is more than 100 grams per capita per day across all the states with an exception of Northeast. Though the consumption of expenditure on food as percentage of total consumption expenditure has reduced, the share of the high value agricultural products has increased. The category of processed foods and beverages has also exhibited an increased trend. An increase in per capita income level, urbanization, increased and improved availability, awareness of healthier diets can be some of the reasons for the same. However, the distribution and consumption pattern is uneven, especially between the higher and lower income groups, and therefore, affordability and diversified food basket remains an issue again. The Indian diet has been considered to be most nutritionally diverse and rich diets. Paradoxically, Indian still has very high prevalence of undernutrition on one hand and obesity and non-communicable diseases on the other hand. The rural urban diversification and income wise comparison of existing nutritional intake in terms of calories from the Indian diets referred diet shows that urban and rural consumers in India are way behind minimum criteria, a sustainable and healthy diet from the nutritional perspective. Both urban and rural consumers on an average are consuming calories lower than the recommended by the Lancet. Against the recommended calorie intake of 2503 kilocalories per day, the highest monthly per capita economy section of urban and rural population is consuming 3143 and 3184 kilocalories respectively. So, the lower the per capita income section consumes 65% of what is recommended as healthy diet by Lancet. Cereals contribute 47 and 58% of total calorie intake in both urban and rural areas, and whereas 32% is suggested by the Lancet diet. The recommended intake of the high value agricultural products towards the calorie intake is 696 kilocalories, and this amount is very low compared to the total calorie contribution, especially in rural areas. It is only 327 kilocalories, and again among the lower income group it is 162 calories, and urban areas it is 124 calories only. so which is also indicative of low nutrition rich diet. Within the high value agricultural products bucket, Lancet recommends an intake of 204 kilocalories from fruits and vegetables. Other than the richer sections of the society, Indians on an average consume only 40% of what is recommended, and the lowest sections of the society consume less than 25% of what is recommended. So, a study by the NSSO reports emphasize that disaggregated analysis of items within vegetable and fruits food group reflects that potatoes and bananas account for large portions of these food groups respectively, because they are available at a cheaper rate. Intake of all sources of protein like dairy, meat, fish and egg and pulses is below the recommended intakes across all areas of sections in the society. In spite of only 20 to 30% of Indians claiming to be vegetarians, intake of meat, fish and egg, especially meat, is only 24% of what is recommended. Another major area of discrepancy between the two sets of diet is intake of calories from processed foods. Urban households in the higher income groups consume 30% of their calorie requirements from the processed foods. The Indian diet is capable of being nutritionally sustainable owing to its diverse variety of food in the Indian culture, but it has not been able to support the nutritional needs of the consumer because of factors like the increase in income, urbanization, opportunity, cost of time spent by women at work, and emphasis on consumption of fast moving convenience foods. The high cost of diverse diet versus the low cost and easy availability of convenience food has come across as one of the major factors in low intake of sufficient micronutrients in the diet. It has become a common practice that because of the availability of more ready to eat foods, the working woman really consumes all the foods that are not prepared nutritionally well. The Lancet recommended diet costs a total of 34 rupees per person per day, which is almost 3 times what the lowest income class of rural areas and 2.5 times of the poorest urban consumers spend on their food. Calories derived from cereals are much higher than those recommended in the reference diet. So, this can be owing to the availability of cereals as the subsidized rate through public distribution system. The cost of recommended quantity of fruits and vegetable intake as per the Lancet diet is 178 rupees in the rural and 179 rupees in the urban areas, which given the per capita spending scenarios in different income classes will be affordable only by the richest 10% section of the urban consumers. The high cost of healthy food may be one of the deterrents for their consumption. Evidence of similar patterns of unaffordability of diet rich in high value agricultural products by the economically weaker section of the society have also been highlighted in several studies. An increased price of protein rich foods like the meat, fish, egg and milk products can be attributed to greater demand of these foods. Similarly, highly seasonal supply of fruits and vegetables and lack of storage infrastructure add to the reasons why fruits and vegetables and processed meat end up being costlier, therefore less affordable. The diet that consists of fruits, vegetables and plant-based unrefined carbohydrates has been found to be lower in the chances of non-communicable diseases and also encourage a sustainable pattern of consumption. The Indian food consumption patterns are shifting away from cereals and staples to share of high vegetable agricultural product basket and processed foods is on rise. In spite of this shift, the Indian diet lacks in terms of sufficient nutritional intake, with the levels of fruits, vegetables, meat, fish and egg being far away from the recommended intake levels. The consumers in the lowest income level are found to be consuming only 10% of these fruits and vegetables and other meat and meat products as per against the recommended levels of 28% of the total food consumption. The richest section of the consumer satisfies 30% of their calorie requirement from the processed food. Therefore, the paradox in terms of insufficient availability and accessibility of nutritionally dense food at one end and lack of awareness and easy accessibility owing to urbanization on the other end is quite evident. While promoting nutritional security, the sustainable diets are environmentally safer because of lower animal based and more plant based content. However, higher costs are associated with the consumption of these diets. Indian food intake becomes nutritionally inadequate, unaffordable due to high prices and inaccessible owing to longer food supply chain. On the environmental front, the study reveals that Indian diets fare better than the Western diets because of lower consumption levels of non-vegetarian sources of proteins. With greater emphasis on intake of animal based proteins to improve nutrient intake in India, optimization of the Indian diets in terms of their affordability, health effects along with minimum environmental impact will be the top priority. An important policy implication of the finding is to address the nutrient inadequacy by making available the diversified diet to all sections of society with minimum risk to the environment. One of the ways in which this can be achieved is by reducing food wastage in the supply chain of agricultural products, especially the high value agricultural products which are highly and easily perishable in nature. So, efforts are needed to put in both the production and consumption side. Technological innovations in the space of production like use of hydroponics, kitchen gardening, community gardening should be encouraged not only to reduce the environmental burden in terms of land use, but also make the seasonal fruits and vegetables available at affordable prices all the year round. Indian agricultural startups may play a very important role in making the agriculture and final consumption more sustainable by direct procurement from the farmers and removing the middlemen from the value chain. So, providing cold storage facilities and thereby reducing the food wastage, providing fresh product right from the farm to the consumer at affordable prices. A significant percentage of Indian population suffers from malnutrition, especially among children. In summary, while the Indian food consumption patterns are evolving, nutritional deficiency and disparities still persist, particularly among the most vulnerable population. So, addressing these issues require a multifaceted approach, including promoting healthy eating habits, improving access to nutritional food and addressing the socio-economic inequalities. Thank you.